Imagine this for a moment. Think back to the last time you felt angry, not the kind of anger that explodes outward, but the kind that burns quietly beneath the surface. Maybe you clenched your jaw, pressed your lips together, or stared blankly at the wall while telling yourself, "It's fine, I'll just let it go." But that tension didn't really vanish, did it? It shifted inward, settling somewhere deep in your chest, whispering softly in the back of your mind. That is what psychologists call repressed anger. It's not the loud, aggressive kind that people often associate with rage. It's the silent version, the one we believe we've mastered, when in truth, it quietly takes control of us in subtle, almost invisible ways. This is what makes it so powerful and so insidious. Studies suggest that nearly 1 in 3 adults habitually suppress their anger instead of expressing it openly. And this isn't just a minor emotional inconvenience. It seeps into how we feel, how we connect with others, and even how our bodies function. What's most fascinating is not only that we do this, but why. Why do we choose to hold it in? And what really happens inside us when we continue to carry it? At its core, anger is a signal. It's the mind's way of alerting us that something in our environment or within ourselves is being threatened, ignored, or disrespected. When we repress that anger, we're essentially cutting off communication with our own inner world. We're saying, "I won't allow this feeling to exist, I'll bury it." Yet, buried emotions don't simply vanish. They linger beneath the surface, quietly shaping our choices, moods, and even our unconscious reactions. What makes repressed anger particularly dangerous is how it disguises itself behind other emotions. You might think you're feeling sad, anxious, or guilty, when beneath it all lies anger that has been denied expression for weeks, months, or even years. Psychologists refer to this as displaced emotion because the energy of anger is too powerful to disappear. It transforms instead, often taking forms that we don't immediately recognize. It might emerge as irritability, passive-aggressive behavior, or even self-doubt. There's a well-known concept in psychology called the frustration-aggression hypothesis. It suggests that when our goals are blocked, anger naturally arises. But if that anger is continually suppressed, it doesn't dissipate, it circulates within us. Picture a pot of water on the stove. If you lift the lid but keep the heat on, eventually it will boil over. That's what happens with chronic emotional repression. Sometimes it leaks out in subtle ways. A sarcastic remark, a sigh, or a sudden shift in mood that feels out of place. Other times, it erupts without warning, catching both you and others off guard. Yet beneath these moments lies something deeper. Repressed anger quietly alters how we see ourselves and the world around us. When we deny our anger, we often begin to doubt our own needs, our rights, and even our sense of worth. We tell ourselves, "I shouldn't be upset. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm too sensitive." Over time, this internal message wears down self-esteem, leaving someone who appears calm on the outside but uneasy within. And yet, paradoxically, this repression can feel safe. Expressing anger feels risky. Many of us were taught early on that anger is unacceptable. Some were punished, rejected, or judged for showing it. So we adapt. We learn to hide the fire. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it shapes the way we move through life. What's striking, though, is that repressed anger is not only destructive, it's revealing. It holds valuable information about the boundaries we have failed to set, the needs we have ignored, and the experiences we have never fully processed. Carl Jung, one of the pioneers of analytical psychology, described repressed emotions as forming a kind of shadow, a part of the self that exists outside of conscious awareness, yet influences everything we do. This shadow is not inherently evil, it is simply energy that has not been integrated. The moment we recognize it, we gain insight, not only into our anger, but into the choices we make, the people we let into our lives, and the patterns we unconsciously repeat. Think of it this way. Each time we push our anger down, we place another brick in a wall that stands between ourselves and the world. Some bricks are small and almost invisible, while others are heavy and undeniable. With each one, the wall grows taller. The space between our genuine emotions and our daily actions widens, and the world begins to feel colder, more distant, and more frustrating. But when we start to acknowledge those bricks, when we see and understand them, they stop being barriers and start becoming guides. Each brick tells a story. It reveals why you react the way you do, what you have been denied, and what you still have the power to reclaim. There is a pattern I often notice in people who struggle with repressed anger. They live within emotional loops that psychologists sometimes describe as suppression cycles. The process is subtle, almost invisible. A person feels discomfort, they push it down, it resurfaces as self-criticism, then guilt appears for even feeling frustrated in the first place. And so, the loop continues. Escaping it can create a quiet but pervasive kind of tension. This tension often shows up as chronic stress, physical unease, or a lingering sense that something is off, though they cannot quite name what it is. So what does science tell us? Research shows that people who regularly suppress anger face higher risks of cardiovascular issues, immune dysfunction, and even chronic pain. These outcomes sound alarming, but the psychological implications are just as profound. Repressed anger can cloud judgment, weaken emotional resilience, and make relationships more difficult to maintain. This is not a moral failure or a flaw in character. It is simply energy that has not been expressed in a healthy way. And here is where it becomes even more interesting. Repressed anger often intertwines with what psychologists call excessive empathic expansion. Many who hold anger inside are deeply sensitive to the emotions of others. They value harmony, avoid conflict, and often take on the role of emotional caretaker. On the surface, this appears admirable, but beneath that sensitivity lies a silence toward their own needs, a fear of disturbing the peace. The very empathy that connects them to others becomes the mechanism that buries their own frustration. Despite its challenges, repressed anger is not a trap. It is an invitation, a doorway into deeper self-understanding. When approached with awareness, it becomes a teacher. Reflecting on what makes us angry, why we feel constrained, or which experiences awaken hidden frustration can illuminate patterns that once operated in the dark. It is not about explosion or reaction. It is about integration, recognition, and expression in a balanced way. Consider this curiosity for a moment. What if those unexplainable moments of tension, irritability, or fatigue are not random? What if they are signals from your mind and body pointing toward anger that has long gone unheard, not the shouting kind, but the quiet, simmering kind that has been politely dismissed for years? Understanding this might reshape the way we navigate stress, relationships, and even our perception of who we are. There is something even more subtle to this. Repressed anger does not only affect us internally, it shapes the energy we bring into the world. It influences how we respond to challenges, how we communicate, and even the emotional climate that surrounds us. It is the anger behind the polite smile, the irritation beneath a calm tone, the quiet tension beneath every reluctant yes we give. Recognizing it not only frees us, but also frees those around us from the unconscious patterns we keep repeating. So, if you ever find yourself snapping at someone over something small, feeling drained after certain interactions, or holding on to resentment that seems out of proportion, you might be witnessing the echoes of repressed anger. This is where the process becomes deeply fascinating. Acknowledging and integrating anger is not just psychological, it is profoundly philosophical. It asks us to face the parts of ourselves we were taught to hide, to understand our needs, and to give voice to the silent stories that live within us. Some of the most transformative moments in life come from encountering these quiet, buried emotions and allowing them to teach us. When anger is integrated, it becomes clarity. It becomes guidance for what truly matters, for the boundaries we need to set, and for the patterns that are ready to be changed. To reach that point, we must stop fearing anger. We must stop viewing it as something inherently negative. It is not the enemy. It is a signal, a heartbeat, a whisper from the deepest part of the soul. Consider a small experiment. The next time you feel irritation rising, before pushing it down, pause. Ask yourself what this feeling is trying to tell you. What need am I denying? What boundary is being tested? That simple act, repeated over time, begins to unwind years of silent repression. It begins the real work of integration. And integration is not only about emotion, it is about authenticity, autonomy, and presence in your own life. This is where the story deepens. Once you begin to notice repressed anger, once you start to observe it within yourself, you realize how intricately it is woven into nearly every decision you make. The choices around relationships, work, even the smallest daily habits are all subtly influenced by the anger you never gave a voice to. It is fascinating, almost like discovering a hidden character in the story of your life, one who has been quietly writing chapters from behind the curtain. Psychologists often describe this as the flow of unconscious emotion. It is not something you consciously think about, yet it pushes and pulls, shaping your behavior in ways that feel natural, inevitable, or even justified. But once you acknowledge it, you can begin to interact with it intentionally. You can ask it questions, you can learn from it, and through that process, anger transforms from a silent saboteur into a companion, a guide, a teacher. Take a moment to consider why repression happens in the first place. Many people grow up in environments where the expression of anger is discouraged. Maybe you were told, "Don't be angry, it's rude," or "You'll hurt someone if you show that." Perhaps you watched loved ones suppress their emotions, modeling calm exteriors while their inner worlds were in turmoil. The message is subtle but enduring. Anger is unsafe. Anger is unacceptable. So, like any intelligent system, the mind adapts. It hides, buries, and redirects energy that cannot be safely expressed. Yet here lies the paradox. Denying anger does not make life safer. It often makes it more complicated. Research in psychology shows that chronic anger repression correlates with higher rates of anxiety, depression, and even insomnia. The energy of anger refuses to disappear. It must move somewhere. When it cannot move outward in a healthy way, it circulates inward, often producing tension, fatigue, or a quiet resentment toward oneself and others. Emotions do not vanish. They multiply in unseen ways. But there is hope in this understanding, because the same research also shows that acknowledging anger safely and intentionally can reduce stress, improve relationships, and enhance emotional clarity. It is not about shouting, attacking, or causing harm. It is about awareness, expression, and release. Even simple practices like journaling, mindful reflection, or creative expression can help. By giving form to what has long been silent, we begin to reclaim the parts of ourselves that were lost. There is a subtle truth that many people overlook. Repressed anger often stems from unmet needs. Not only the major ones, but also the small, everyday needs for respect, acknowledgement, fairness, or simple care. When those needs go unanswered, and the resulting anger is silenced, the mind begins to normalize deprivation. Over time, this can lead to a quiet invisibility, where a person starts to doubt their own meaning and legitimacy. That is when anger becomes the hidden engine of dissatisfaction, quietly fueling self-doubt, frustration, and disconnection. Yet there is a powerful lesson within all of this. Anger is information. It is a signal that shows where our boundaries have been crossed, where we have compromised too much, or where our values have been ignored. It is not an enemy to suppress, but a guide to help us understand ourselves more fully. When approached consciously, it becomes transformative. Imagine this. What if instead of treating anger as something to avoid, you saw it as a teacher? Every irritation, every small resentment, every moment of quiet frustration becomes a map. Each one points toward an area of life that needs attention, healing, or adjustment. Here lies the quiet beauty of it. When you integrate anger into awareness, it loses its destructive edge. It becomes energy you can use for clarity, creativity, and even compassion. One of the most fascinating aspects of repressed anger is how it interacts with relationships. Those who hold their anger inside often project it outward, not as direct aggression but as tension, criticism, or distance. They may appear calm, even kind, yet others can feel the subtle barrier between them. It is as if the body and the mind are whispering truths that the voice refuses to speak. The irony is that by repressing anger, we sometimes create the very conflicts we hope to avoid. The remedy is gentle awareness and honest expression. Not every anger needs confrontation, but every anger deserves acknowledgement. Psychologists often suggest beginning with reflection. What am I truly feeling right now? Why is this situation triggering me? Which need is being overlooked? When we can answer these questions honestly, we gain the freedom to act, release, or transform that energy. The power lies in conscious choice, not suppression. This brings us to a deeper philosophical dimension. Repressed anger is closely tied to authenticity. When we deny our anger, we deny a part of ourselves. We tell ourselves that certain emotions are illegitimate, that some experiences are unworthy of recognition. Over time, that self-denial becomes a quiet source of inner conflict. But when we acknowledge and integrate anger, we reclaim wholeness, presence, and the ability to live in alignment with our values. There is also a subtle, almost poetic truth here. Anger, when acknowledged, is rarely violent. It is often a quiet insistence that we matter, that our experiences are valid, that our boundaries deserve respect. It is the energy that fuels self-protection, advocacy, and sometimes profound creativity. Many artists, writers, and philosophers throughout history have drawn upon this silent fire, transforming personal frustration into works of insight, empathy, and beauty. And here is something worth considering. Anger is temporary. The longer it is repressed, the more distorted it becomes. What begins as a simple frustration can, over years, evolve into a tangled web of resentment, projection, and regret. But the moment we acknowledge it, even quietly within ourselves, we begin to untangle that web. The energy starts to move again, like a river released from a dam. Suddenly, the mind and body can breathe more freely. Notice this one truth. Repressed anger is profoundly human. It is not a failure or a flaw. Everyone experiences it. The difference lies in whether we are willing to meet it with curiosity, reflection, and compassion. There is a kind of courage in noticing, naming, and understanding anger, because it requires honesty, vulnerability, and self-respect. It is a practice, a form of emotional intelligence that can transform the way we live and relate to others. And here is a psychological insight that might surprise you. Expressing anger in a constructive way actually strengthens empathy. When we recognize our own emotions, we become more attuned to the emotions of others. By honoring our own boundaries, we learn how to honor theirs. By learning to articulate inner tension without judgment, we develop a language of connection rather than conflict. In this paradox, anger becomes a bridge instead of a barrier. Step back for a moment and look at the larger picture. Life, in many ways, is the process of learning how to navigate the quiet currents within us. Repressed anger is one of those currents, often invisible, yet incredibly powerful. It shapes perception, decision-making, and emotional experience. But it is also a doorway, an invitation to engage with ourselves more honestly, to reclaim energy, and to cultivate deeper empathy and wisdom. So consider this reflection. The next time you feel irritation rising or a tension you cannot name, pause. Take a breath and ask yourself, What is this feeling trying to tell me? Which boundary or need has gone unacknowledged? How can I meet this part of myself with compassion? Within that simple act lies transformation. It is the moment where silent energy becomes conscious insight, where anger ceases to be shadow and becomes a source of clarity, presence, and emotional depth. At the center of the psychology of repressed anger lies this truth. Our emotions are never the enemy. They are messages, guides, and mirrors reflecting the richness of our inner life. To ignore them is to live half awake. To meet them and integrate them is to live fully awake, fully human, and fully engaged with the world around us. Repressed anger, then, is not something to fear. It is something to notice, to understand, and to respect. It is the whisper of our own authenticity, calling us to pay attention, to reclaim our energy, and to live with greater awareness. It teaches us that even the quietest fire can illuminate the path towards self-understanding, emotional freedom, and the courage to truly be ourselves. Because in the end, acknowledging repressed anger is not about losing control. It is about regaining connection with yourself, with your emotions, and with the world you inhabit. And that connection, subtle yet profound, has the power to transform not only your inner life, but the way you move through the world with grace, insight, and presence.